The autumn of 1997 in Millfield, Connecticut had been unseasonably warm, the kind of October that tricks children into believing summer might last forever. It was on such a deceptively perfect afternoon, October 15th to be exact, that 5 children disappeared while playing what should have been an innocent game of hide-and-seek in the woods behind Elm Street Elementary School. 27 years later, Dr. Sarah Morrison would discover that the game had never really ended. But that discovery lay in the future, on a cold morning in 2024, when Sarah, now a forensic acoustics specialist with the FBI, would find herself standing in the basement of Millfield's abandoned town hall, listening to voices that should have been silent for nearly 3 decades. The story truly began on that October afternoon when 10-year-old Emma Chen convinced her 4 best friends to venture into the dense woodland that bordered their small Connecticut town. Emma was the natural leader of their group, the kind of child who could convince others to follow her into adventure with nothing more than a crooked smile and an infectious laugh. "Come on," Emma had called to her friends as they gathered on the playground after school. "My mum won't be here to pick me up for another hour. We have time for one big game." The others needed little convincing. There was Marcus Williams, 11 years old and always ready for excitement, the kind of boy who collected pocket knives and knew how to build fires from scratch. Twin sisters Ashley and Brittany Johnson, both 9, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Ashley cautious and thoughtful, Brittany impulsive and brave, and finally 7-year-old Tommy Rodriguez, the youngest of the group, but determined never to be left behind. Together, they had been inseparable since the beginning of the school year, a tight-knit group that parents in Millfield had grown accustomed to seeing around town, always together, always planning their next adventure. "Where should we play?" asked Ashley, adjusting her backpack nervously. Unlike her sister, Ashley had always been wary of the woods, sensing something unsettling about the way the trees seemed to close in around anyone who ventured too far from the school grounds. "The old trail," Emma announced, pointing toward a barely visible path that disappeared into the thick canopy of maples and oaks. "My dad told me it used to be a logging road back in the old days. It goes way back into the forest, maybe even to the old quarry." The quarry. Every child in Millfield had heard stories about the abandoned stone quarry that lay somewhere deep in the woods. Some said it was filled with water so deep you couldn't see the bottom. Others claimed it was where bootleggers had hidden their operations during Prohibition. All the stories agreed on one thing: it was a place where children weren't supposed to go, which of course made it irresistible. "I'll count first," Emma declared as they reached the edge of the tree line. "I'll count to 100, and you guys find the best hiding spots ever. The winner gets my Pokémon cards." It was an offer too good to refuse. Emma had recently acquired a holographic Charizard that was the envy of every 4th grader in school. The 4 friends scattered into the woods as Emma began counting, her voice carrying clearly through the crisp autumn air. 1, 2, 3... The sound of rustling leaves and snapping twigs gradually faded as the children found their hiding places deeper and deeper in the forest. Emma finished counting and began her search, calling out to her friends in the sing-song voice children use when playing games that are still fun, still innocent. But as the minutes passed and she found no trace of Marcus, Ashley, Brittany, or Tommy, her calls became more urgent. "Guys, this isn't funny anymore," Emma shouted into the deepening shadows of the forest. "Where are you?" The woods had grown quiet in that particular way that forests do as day turns toward evening, when the daytime birds stop singing and the nocturnal creatures haven't yet begun their calls. Emma's voice seemed to be absorbed by the trees themselves, creating no echo, no response, as the sun began to sink lower, painting the canopy in brilliant oranges and reds. Emma made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of returning to the school to get help, she ventured deeper into the woods, following what she thought might be tracks or signs of her friend's passage. She found the quarry just as darkness was beginning to fall. It was nothing like the mysterious water-filled pit of local legend. Instead, Emma discovered a series of terraced stone walls surrounding what appeared to be an old excavation site. But rather than being filled with water, the quarry contained the ruins of what looked like structures, stone foundations, crumbling walls, and most unsettling of all, what appeared to be entrances to underground chambers carved directly into the bedrock. "Marcus!" Emma called out, her voice now tight with fear. "Ashley! Brittany! Tommy!" Her calls echoed off the stone walls of the quarry, creating a hollow, distorted sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. But there was no response from her friends. Emma stood at the edge of the quarry as full darkness descended, paralyzed by indecision. Should she go down into the pit to search for her friends? Should she run back to get help? The beam of her small flashlight seemed pathetic against the vast darkness that had swallowed the forest. She never got the chance to decide. A search party led by her frantic parents found her 3 hours later, standing at the quarry's edge in a state of shock, unable to explain what had happened to the other 4 children or how she had become separated from them. The search for Marcus, Ashley, Brittany, and Tommy lasted 6 weeks. State police, FBI agents, volunteer searchers, and even psychics descended on Millfield's quiet streets. Every inch of the forest was combed. The quarry was explored by professional cave rescue teams. Helicopters with thermal imaging equipment swept the area daily. They found nothing, no trace of the 4 missing children, no evidence of foul play, no signs of animal attack, no indication of where 4 children could simply vanish without leaving so much as a footprint or a piece of torn clothing behind. The case became one of Connecticut's most baffling unsolved mysteries. Emma Chen, the only witness, underwent extensive psychological evaluation, but her story never changed. She had been counting, she had searched for her friends, she had found the quarry, and they were simply gone. As the years passed, theories proliferated. Some believed the children had fallen into hidden chambers in the quarry and become trapped. Others suspected abduction, possibly by someone familiar with the local terrain. A few residents whispered about older legends, stories about the quarry site that predated the stone excavation, tales of indigenous peoples who had considered the area sacred and dangerous. Emma Chen grew up under a shadow of suspicion and guilt that never fully lifted. Some in the town blamed her for leading her friends into danger. Others whispered that she must know more than she was telling. Even those who believed her innocence couldn't help but wonder how she alone had survived whatever had taken her friends. By 2024, Emma was 37 years old, a successful architect living in Boston, who returned to Millfield only for obligatory visits to her aging parents. The disappearance of her childhood friends had shaped every aspect of her adult life, driving her to create structures that were safe, predictable, controlled, the opposite of the mysterious, dangerous places that had claimed the people she loved most. The town of Millfield itself had never fully recovered from the disappearance. The elementary school had installed new security measures and forbidden children from playing near the forest. The quarry had been fenced off and posted with warning signs. But the mystery lingered like a wound that wouldn't heal, affecting every family with children, every parent who had ever let their kids play outside unsupervised. It was into this still grieving community that Dr. Sarah Morrison arrived in March 2024, 27 years after the disappearance, carrying equipment that would finally break the silence that had surrounded the case for nearly 3 decades. Sarah was a forensic acoustic specialist, a relatively new field that applied advanced audio analysis techniques to criminal investigations. She had been called to Millfield not because of the 1997 disappearance, but because of a completely unrelated case. The town was planning to demolish the old town hall, and workers had discovered what appeared to be hidden chambers beneath the building's foundation. The chambers themselves weren't particularly unusual. Many New England buildings from the 1800s had been constructed with hidden spaces used for everything from root cellars to underground railroad stops. But preliminary exploration had revealed that these chambers extended much further than anyone had expected, forming a network of passages that seemed to connect with natural cave systems beneath the town. More unsettling was the discovery that some of these passages appeared to lead toward the area where the old quarry was located. "Dr. Morrison," said Detective James Park, the current head of Millfield's small police department, as he led Sarah down the stone steps into the town hall's basement. "I want to be clear that we're not asking you to investigate the 1997 case. That file has been officially closed for over a decade. We just need you to do acoustic mapping of these chambers to make sure they're safe before the demolition crew starts work." Sarah nodded, adjusting the strap of her equipment bag. Acoustic mapping was routine work, using sound waves to create detailed three-dimensional maps of underground spaces, identifying structural weaknesses, hidden chambers, or dangerous areas. "How extensive are we talking about?" Sarah asked as they reached the basement level. "That's what we need you to tell us," Detective Park replied, stopping in front of what appeared to be a recently opened entrance in the basement's stone wall. The workers were doing foundation inspection when they found this. The opening was sealed with mortared stones, probably for decades. Once they opened it up, he gestured toward the entrance, where temporary lighting had been strung into the darkness beyond. "We realized we were looking at something much bigger than anyone expected." Sarah set up her equipment methodically, placing sensitive microphones and acoustic sensors at strategic points throughout the basement and just inside the entrance to the hidden chambers. Her plan was to use controlled sound pulses to map the underground network, creating a detailed picture of the passages without having to physically explore every tunnel. "This will take about 4 hours," she told Detective Park. "The computer needs time to process all the acoustic data and build the 3D model." "We'll leave you to it," Park replied. "The building's empty except for you, so you shouldn't have any interference. Call if you need anything." Sarah began her work in the methodical way that had made her reputation in forensic acoustics. She started with broad-spectrum sound mapping, sending audio pulses through the underground network and measuring how they reflected back to her sensors. The initial results showed exactly what she had expected: a complex system of man-made passages connecting to natural limestone caves, extending roughly in the direction of the old quarry. But as the hours passed and her equipment gathered more detailed data, Sarah began to notice anomalies in the acoustic readings. There were patterns in the sound reflections that didn't match the expected signature of empty stone passages. Instead, her instruments were detecting what appeared to be organic materials scattered throughout the underground network. More puzzling were periodic sound variations that seemed to occur at regular intervals. As if something in the passages was making noise, Sarah frowned at her computer screen, adjusting the sensitivity settings on her instruments. The readings had to be the result of equipment malfunction or environmental interference. Underground passages often produce strange acoustic effects: wind through hidden openings, water dripping from unseen sources, the settling of old structures. But as she fine-tuned her equipment, the anomalous readings became more pronounced rather than less. Her instruments were detecting not just irregular sounds, but what appeared to be organized patterns of sound occurring deep within the underground network. Sarah checked her equipment connections, ran diagnostic tests, even moved her sensors to different locations, but the readings remained consistent. Something in the underground passages was generating complex, patterned sounds at regular intervals. It was nearly midnight when Sarah first heard them clearly. She had been reviewing the acoustic data on her laptop when her headphones picked up something that made her blood run cold. Buried in the layers of recorded sound from the underground passages, barely audible above the background noise, were voices, children's voices. Sarah pulled off her headphones, her hands shaking as she checked her equipment again. There had to be an explanation. Radio interference, sound carrying from somewhere else in the town, audio contamination from some unknown source. But when she isolated the audio and enhanced it using her specialized software, the voices became unmistakably clear. They were children, and they were playing. "Ready or not, here I come." The voice was high, excited, the tone of a child engaged in a game. It was followed by other voices, laughing, calling out, the unmistakable sounds of hide and seek being played in the darkness far beneath the town of Millfield. Sarah sat in the empty basement, listening to recordings of children playing a game in passages where no children should be able to go, where no children had been seen for 27 years. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone to call Detective Park. But before she could dial, her headphones filled with another sound that made her question everything she thought she knew about the nature of reality itself. "Emma?" called one of the underground voices, clear as day through her sophisticated audio equipment. "Emma, where are you? We're still hiding. The game isn't over yet." Detective James Park arrived at the town hall basement at 12:47 a.m., less than 15 minutes after Sarah Morrison's panicked phone call. He found her sitting on the floor beside her equipment, headphones around her neck, staring at her laptop screen with an expression he had seen before, the look of someone whose understanding of reality had just been fundamentally shaken. "Dr. Morrison," Park said gently, crouching down beside her. "You said on the phone that you found something related to the 1997 disappearance." Sarah looked up at him, her face pale in the harsh basement lighting. "Detective Park, I need you to listen to something, but I need to warn you that what you're about to hear is going to sound impossible." Park had been a police officer for 18 years, the last 7 as Millfield's chief detective. He had learned that impossible things happened more often than people liked to believe. "Show me what you found." Sarah pulled up an audio file on her laptop and handed Park a set of headphones. This was recorded approximately 30 minutes ago from sensors placed about 200 feet into the underground passages. The audio has been cleaned and enhanced, but otherwise unaltered. Park put on the headphones and pressed play. For the first few seconds, he heard only the ambient sound of underground spaces. Distant dripping, the whisper of air moving through stone passages. Then he heard the voices, children's voices, clear and unmistakable, playing hide and seek in the darkness beneath Millfield. "Ready or not, here I come. You'll never find us. This is the best hiding spot ever." And then, the voice that made Park's blood run cold. "Emma, where are you? We're still hiding. The game isn't over yet." Park removed the headphones slowly, his mind racing through possible explanations. Radio interference, some kind of audio contamination. Children playing somewhere else in town, their voices somehow carrying through the underground network. "Dr. Morrison," he said carefully, "is there any possibility that this audio could be coming from somewhere else? Some kind of acoustic phenomenon where sound is traveling from a different location?" "I've been doing acoustic forensics for 8 years, Sarah replied. "I've worked cases involving sound traveling through building ventilation systems, across bodies of water, through underground utility networks. This isn't that. The voices are originating from within the passages themselves, approximately 400 to 600 feet underground." Park stood up, pacing the small basement space as he tried to process what he had just heard. "But that's impossible. Those passages have been sealed for decades, and even if someone had access to them—" "Oh, Detective," Sarah interrupted, "there's something else. The voices, they don't match the acoustic signature of living speakers." "What does that mean?" When a person speaks, their voice creates specific patterns of sound wave displacement, air pressure changes, even tiny vibrations in surrounding materials. Living human voices have characteristics that my equipment can measure and analyze. Sarah pointed to her laptop screen, where waveform patterns scrolled across the display. These voices don't have those characteristics. Are you saying the voices aren't real? I'm saying they aren't being produced by living people speaking in real time. Park felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement's cool temperature. Could they be recordings, some kind of playback system? That's what I thought initially, but recordings have their own signature patterns, compression artifacts, frequency limitations, the sound of speakers or audio equipment. These voices don't have those characteristics either. Then what are they? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. But detective, there's more. I've been monitoring the passages for the past hour, and the voices are responding to changes in the environment. Responding how? When I moved my equipment, the voices changed location. When I adjusted the sensitivity of my microphones, they began speaking more quietly. It's as if they're aware of being listened to. Park had handled many strange cases during his career, missing persons investigations that defied explanation, crimes that seemed to have supernatural elements, witnesses who reported things that couldn't possibly be true. But this was different. This was evidence, recorded and measurable, of something that challenged the basic laws of physics. Dr. Morrison, I need you to pack up your equipment. We're going to seal this area until I can figure out what we're dealing with. Detective, wait. Sarah grabbed his arm. I think we need to go into the passages. Absolutely not. If there's even a remote possibility that someone is down there. There's no one down there, Sarah said firmly. Not anyone living. But detective, those children who disappeared in 1997, Marcus Williams, Ashley and Brittany Johnson, Tommy Rodriguez, what if they're still here? What if they've been here all along? Park stared at her. Dr. Morrison, those children are dead. They've been dead for 27 years. What if they're not? The question hung in the air between them, impossible and terrible, and somehow undeniable given what they had just experienced. What are you suggesting? Park asked. I'm suggesting that we don't understand what happened in these passages 27 years ago. I'm suggesting that whatever caused 4 children to vanish without a trace might still be active. And I'm suggesting that if there's any possibility at all, that those children are somehow still alive down there, we have a moral obligation to find them. Park looked at the entrance to the underground passages, then back at Sarah's equipment with its impossible recordings of impossible voices. Every instinct he had as a police officer told him to seal the area, call in federal authorities, turn this into someone else's problem. But every instinct he had as a human being told him that Sarah was right. If we do this, he said finally, we do it properly. Full safety protocols, backup equipment, constant communication with the surface, and at the first sign of danger, we abort. Sarah nodded. Agreed. But detective, I think you should call Emma Chen first. Emma Chen? Why? Because, Sarah said, pulling up another audio file on her laptop. The voices have been calling for her all night. 2 hours later, at nearly 3 a.m., Emma Chen sat in the Millfield Police Department, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold while she listened to recordings that brought back memories she had spent 27 years trying to forget. She looked older than her 37 years, Park noted, with the kind of weariness that comes from carrying a burden too heavy for any one person to bear. Her hands shook slightly as she removed the headphones Sarah had given her. That's them, Emma whispered. That's Marcus and Ashley and Brittany and Tommy. Those are their voices. Ms. Chen, Park said gently, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, but I need to ask, is there anything about that day, anything about what happened in the quarry that you haven't told us? Anything you might have forgotten or suppressed? Emma was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. There was something else, something I've never told anyone because I thought people would think I was crazy. What was it? When I found the quarry that day, when I was calling for my friends, I heard them answer me, not from the surface, but from underneath, from below the quarry floor. Sarah leaned forward. What did they say? They said they had found the best hiding place ever. They said they were underground in tunnels and chambers that went on forever. They said it was like a whole other world down there. Emma's voice broke. They said they were having so much fun that they didn't want to come back up. What did you do? I called down to them, told them it was getting dark, told them we needed to go home. And they laughed. They said time was different down there, that it was always daytime in the underground world. They said I should come down and see. But you didn't go down? Emma shook her head. I was scared. The quarry was so deep, and the entrances to the underground passages looked dangerous. I told them to come back up, that we could explore another day. But they didn't come. They just stopped answering. Park exchanged glances with Sarah. Ms. Chen, in all the interviews over the years, why didn't you tell anyone about hearing your friends underground? Because when the search teams explored the quarry, they said there was nothing down there. No passages deep enough for children to get lost in. No chambers big enough for 4 kids to hide in. The experts said I must have been hearing echoes or imagining things because I was traumatized. Emma looked up at them with eyes full of pain. So I started believing that maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the guilt and fear had made me hear things that weren't there. But now? Sarah asked. Now I know I didn't imagine it. Those voices on your recordings, those are my friends. They're still down there, still playing hide and seek, still waiting for me to find them. Park stood up, decision made. Miss Chen, Dr. Morrison and I are going to explore the underground passages tomorrow morning. We're going to find out what happened to your friends. But I need to ask, would you be willing to come with us? Emma looked terrified at the suggestion, but she nodded. I should have gone down 27 years ago. I should have followed them instead of being scared. Maybe if I had... Ms. Chen, Sarah interrupted, you were 10 years old. You made the safe choice, the smart choice, but now we have the equipment and expertise to explore safely. Now we can find them. What if... Emma's voice trailed off. What if what? What if they blame me for leaving them down there all these years? What if they're angry that I never came back for them? Park put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Ms. Chen, if your friends are somehow still alive down there, they're going to be so happy to see you that blame will be the last thing on their minds. But even as he said the words, Park couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complex and dangerous than a simple rescue mission. The voices on Sarah's recordings didn't sound like children who had been trapped underground for 27 years. They sounded like children who were still playing, still having fun, still living in the moment when they had first discovered their underground world, which raised questions that Park wasn't sure he wanted to answer. How could children survive underground for nearly 3 decades? How could they still sound exactly the same as they had the day they disappeared? And most disturbing of all, if they had been down there all along, why were they only now calling for Emma to join them? The exploration team assembled at dawn. Detective Park, Dr. Sarah Morrison, Emma Chen, and 2 additional specialists Park had called in during the night. Dr. Michael Torres was a cave rescue expert from the Connecticut State Police, and Janet Walsh was a paramedic with experience in underground emergency situations. They gathered in the town hall basement, surrounded by professional spelunking equipment, emergency medical supplies, and Sarah's sophisticated audio monitoring gear. The plan is simple, Park announced to the group. We follow the main passage toward the quarry using Dr. Morrison's acoustic mapping to guide us toward the source of the voices. We document everything, but our primary objective is search and rescue. If we find the missing children, we get them out safely. If we encounter any danger, we retreat immediately. Sarah had spent the early morning hours creating a detailed map of the underground network using her acoustic data. The passages formed a complex web beneath Millfield, with the main tunnel running roughly northeast from the town hall toward the quarry. But there were also side passages, vertical shafts, and what appeared to be large chambers scattered throughout the system. The voices seemed to be originating from this area. Sarah pointed to a section of her map about half a mile underground. It's a large chamber system near what would be directly beneath the old quarry site. Emma stared at the map, her face pale but determined. That makes sense. That's where I heard them calling from that day. They entered the passages single file, headlamps cutting through darkness that felt ancient and absolute. The tunnels were a mixture of natural limestone caves and what appeared to be much older human construction. Stone walls fitted with a precision that spoke of master craftsmen from a bygone era. These passages are old, Doctor, Torres observed, running his hand along the smooth stone walls. Much older than the town records indicate. Some of this construction looks pre-colonial. As they moved deeper underground, Sarah's equipment began picking up the voices again. But now, with the team actually in the passages, the children's voices seemed to be coming from multiple directions, as if they were moving through the tunnel system, always staying just ahead of the search party. "They know we're here," Emma whispered. "They're leading us somewhere." "Leading us where?" Park asked. Emma didn't answer, but Sarah's expression as she monitored her equipment suggested she was beginning to understand something the others hadn't yet grasped. "Detective," Sarah said quietly, "I'm reading multiple acoustic anomalies throughout this system. It's not just the voices. The passages themselves are behaving in ways that don't make physical sense." "What do you mean?" "Sound should behave predictably in underground spaces. But down here, it's as if the normal rules don't apply. Voices are carrying impossible distances, echoing in patterns that suggest the tunnel geometry is changing, coming from directions that don't match the physical layout." They had been walking for nearly an hour when they reached the first large chamber. It was vast, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above their headlamps and walls covered in symbols that none of them could identify. But it was Emma who noticed the most disturbing detail. "Look at the floor," she whispered. Scattered across the stone floor of the chamber were dozens of small objects, toys, clothing, personal items that looked as if they had been left behind by children. But these weren't just any children's belongings. These were items from different eras, different decades, some looking as if they had been there for a century or more. And in the center of the chamber, arranged in a perfect circle, were 4 small piles of more recent items: a Pokémon card collection, a red hair ribbon, a pair of identical friendship bracelets, and a small wooden yo-yo. "Those are theirs," Emma breathed. "Those belong to Marcus and Ashley and Brittany and Tommy." It was then that the voices started again, echoing through the chamber from everywhere and nowhere, speaking in perfect unison. "Emma, you came. We knew you would come eventually. We've been waiting so long to show you the best hiding place ever. Come play with us, Emma. Come see what we found down here. The game isn't over yet." Emma Chen stood frozen in the center of the chamber, staring at the personal belongings of her 4 childhood friends, arranged in a perfect circle on the ancient stone floor. The voices calling her name seemed to come from the walls themselves, resonating through the limestone with an otherworldly quality that made her bones ache with recognition and terror. "Emma, don't you want to play with us anymore?" The voice was unmistakably Ashley Johnson's, carrying the same slight lisp she'd had when they were children. "We've been waiting for you for so long. Detective Park instinctively moved closer to Emma, his hand resting on his service weapon, despite the absurdity of trying to shoot at voices emerging from solid rock. Dr. Torres was scanning the chamber with his headlamp, searching for hidden speakers or some rational explanation for what they were experiencing. But it was Dr. Sarah Morrison who made the connection that would finally unlock the truth about Millfield's missing children. "The symbols," Sarah whispered, pointing her headlamp at the walls surrounding them. "Look at the symbols carved into the stone." The chamber walls were covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and flow in the dancing light of their headlamps. Some appeared to be pictographs showing groups of people, including children, entering cave systems. Others showed more abstract patterns, spirals, interconnected circles, geometric designs that seemed to pulse with their own inner rhythm. "These aren't Native American," Dr. Torres observed, running his fingers along the carved stone. "The technique is wrong. The style doesn't match any pre-Columbian culture I know." "Because they're not pre-Columbian," Sarah said, her voice tight with realization. "They're not even human." The others turned to stare at her, but Sarah was studying her acoustic equipment with growing alarm. "The sound patterns down here, they're not just defying physics. They're creating a kind of resonance field that affects perception, memory, even the passage of time itself." "What are you saying?" Park demanded. "I'm saying that these passages weren't built by people. They were built by something that understands sound and vibration in ways we can't comprehend, something that uses acoustic resonance to create experiences." Emma had been listening to their conversation, but her attention was drawn to something else. In the darkness beyond their headlamps, she could see movement, not the solid forms of people, but something more ephemeral, shapes that flickered in and out of existence like shadows cast by firelight. "They're here," Emma whispered. "Marcus, Ashley, Brittany, Tommy. They're all here." The others followed her gaze and saw what she was seeing. 4 childlike figures standing at the edge of their light, translucent and shimmering, but unmistakably the missing children. They looked exactly as they had 27 years ago. Marcus with his gap-toothed grin, the Johnson twins with their identical pigtails, little Tommy with his oversized backpack. "Emma," said the figure that had been Marcus Williams, "you finally came to play with us. We found the most amazing place. Want to see?" Emma took a step toward her old friends, but Park grabbed her arm. "Emma, don't! Something's not right here." "They're my friends," Emma said, but her voice carried doubt. "They've been waiting for me." "Emma," Sarah said urgently, "look at your friends. Really look at them." Emma focused on the shimmering figures, and as she did, she began to notice details that chilled her to the bone. Marcus's grin never changed, never moved. The twins' pigtails hung in exactly the same position, as if frozen in time. Tommy's eyes never blinked. "They're not your friends," Sarah continued. "They're echoes, acoustic impressions captured by whatever force exists in these passages." "Emma, come play with us," the figure of Ashley called out. But now Emma could hear the artificiality in the voice, like a recording played through speakers, but with the speakers hidden somewhere impossible to locate. "What happened to them?" Emma asked, tears streaming down her face. "What happened to my real friends?" It was then that Sarah's equipment detected something new, a different kind of acoustic signature coming from deeper in the chamber. Not the artificial voices of the echoes, but something older, more alien, more vast. "There's something else down here," Sarah said, adjusting her senses. "Something much larger than the children's voices." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop as a new sound filled the space. Not a voice, but a kind of harmonics that seemed to come from the stone itself. It was beautiful and terrible, like whale song mixed with crystal chimes, and it carried meaning that bypassed language and spoke directly to some primal part of their brains. Emma understood first. It's trying to communicate. The harmonics shifted and changed, and suddenly Emma could feel rather than hear what the presence was trying to tell them. Images flooded her mind, not her own memories, but something far older and more alien. She saw the truth about the passages beneath Millfield. They weren't just caves or tunnels. They were a kind of living system, a network of interconnected chambers that existed partially in normal space and partially in something else. A dimension where time moved differently, where consciousness could be preserved and replayed like recordings. The presence that inhabited these passages wasn't malevolent, but it was utterly alien. It fed on experiences, particularly the intense emotions and memories of childhood. When children entered its domain, it didn't harm them. It preserved them, capturing their essence at the moment of their greatest joy and wonder. "The children," Emma gasped as the visions continued. "They're not dead, but they're not alive either. They're preserved, like insects in amber but made of sound and memory instead of resin." The presence had been doing this for centuries, maybe millennia. Every few decades, children would discover the passages and be drawn in by the promise of the ultimate hiding place, the perfect game that never had to end. Their physical bodies would be absorbed into the acoustic matrix of the passages, but their consciousness, their personalities, their voices would be preserved forever, replaying their last moments of happiness in an endless loop. "Emma," the harmonic presence seemed to say without words, "your friends are happy here. They play forever in the place between spaces. They never grow old, never face pain or loss or the disappointments of adulthood. Would you like to join them?" Emma looked at the shimmering figures of her childhood friends, saw the innocent joy frozen on their faces, and understood the terrible temptation they represented. Down here, she could be 10 years old again. Down here, she could play hide-and-seek forever with the people she had loved most in the world. Down here, time had no meaning, and heartbreak didn't exist. "Emma, no," Detective Park said, seeming to sense what she was thinking. "Whatever this thing is offering you, it's not real. Those aren't your friends anymore." "But they could be," Emma whispered. "If I stay here, we could all be together again." Sarah grabbed Emma's other arm. "Emma, listen to me. Those children you see, they're not experiencing joy. They're trapped in a single moment, playing the same game over and over for 27 years. That's not happiness. That's a kind of hell." The acoustic presence seemed to respond to Sarah's words with a shift in its harmonics. Not anger, but something like confusion, as if it genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would see its preservation of perfect childhood moments as anything other than a gift. "Emma," Sarah continued, "your friends loved you. The real Marcus and Ashley and Brittany and Tommy loved you. They wouldn't want you to sacrifice your life, your future, your chance to grow and change and experience everything the world has to offer. They would want you to live." Emma looked again at the shimmering figures of her friends, and this time she saw them differently. Not as joyful playmates, but as prisoners trapped in an endless repetition of a single day. She thought about the lives they had never gotten to live. Marcus would have been 38 now, probably married with children of his own. Ashley and Brittany would have grown into their own unique personalities instead of remaining frozen as identical twins. Tommy would have graduated high school, gone to college, fallen in love. "I'm sorry," Emma said to the figures, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you, but I can't stay. I have to live for all of us." The acoustic presence seemed to recoil at her words, its harmonics taking on a desperate, pleading quality. For the first time in perhaps centuries, someone had rejected its offer of eternal childhood. "We need to leave," Sarah said urgently. "Now. It's getting agitated." The chamber began to vibrate around them, not physically but acoustically, as if the very air was becoming unstable. The figures of the children flickered more rapidly, their voices calling out in distress. "Emma, don't leave us again. Please stay and play. The game isn't over." But Emma had made her choice. With tears streaming down her face, she turned her back on the echoes of her childhood friends and followed the rescue team toward the exit. The journey back through the passages was a nightmare of shifting acoustics and impossible geometry. The alien presence was clearly displeased with their rejection of its gift, and the tunnels themselves seemed to be fighting against their escape. Passages that had been straight on the way in were now filled with twists and turns. Chambers that had been empty now echoed with the voices of hundreds of children from across the centuries, all calling for Emma to come back and play. But Sarah's acoustic equipment proved to be their salvation. By following the sound patterns that led back toward normal space, she was able to guide them through the maze of shifting passages and back toward the town hall basement. They emerged into the pre-dawn darkness of Millfield, gasping and shaking, their minds reeling from what they had experienced. Behind them, the entrance to the passages stood open, like a wound in the earth. But the voices that had called to them from the depths had finally fallen silent. "What do we do now?" Park asked, staring at the entrance to horrors that couldn't be explained in any police report. "We seal it," Sarah said firmly. "We seal it permanently and make sure no other children can ever be drawn into those passages." "But the children down there," Emma began, "are beyond our help," Sarah said gently. "I'm sorry, Emma. I know how much you want to save them. But they're not really your friends anymore. They're echoes, impressions, memories trapped in an alien system we don't understand. The kindest thing we can do is make sure no other children join them." Over the following weeks, the entrance to the underground passages was not just sealed, but filled with concrete and steel barriers. The official report listed the closure as a safety measure due to unstable geological conditions beneath the town hall. No mention was made of voices, echoes, or alien presences. Emma Chen returned to Boston, but she was changed by her experience in the passages. She threw herself into her work as an architect, but now her buildings were designed not just for safety and function, but for psychological well-being. She specialized in designing spaces for children, schools, playgrounds, community centers, all built to foster healthy play and social interaction while providing multiple visible exits and clear sightlines. She never spoke publicly about what she had found beneath Millfield, but she became a quiet advocate for child safety, funding search and rescue organizations and supporting families of missing children. Those who worked with her noticed that she seemed to carry a deep sadness, as if mourning losses that couldn't be shared or explained. Dr. Sarah Morrison continued her work in forensic acoustics, but she also began researching historical reports of children disappearing near cave systems and underground locations. What she found suggested that the phenomenon beneath Millfield was not unique. Similar disappearances had been reported in dozens of locations around the world, always involving children, always near underground passages, always leaving behind no physical evidence. She never published her findings, knowing they would be dismissed as folklore or fantasy, but she did create a private database, shared with a small network of researchers and investigators, documenting locations where children should never be allowed to play alone. Detective Park remained in Millfield, but he made sure that the old quarry site was permanently fenced and patrolled. He also instituted new safety protocols for the town's children, including GPS tracking devices and strict rules about playing near wooded areas or underground spaces. Late at night, when the town was quiet, Park would sometimes hear what sounded like children's laughter carried on the wind. But he had learned to recognize the difference between the natural sounds of living children playing in their yards and something else. Something that called from beneath the earth, offering games that never ended and hiding places from which no one ever returned. The town of Millfield moved on, as small towns do, carrying its secrets quietly and protecting its children as best it could. But those who knew the truth about what lay beneath their streets lived with the knowledge that some games should never be played, some hiding places should never be found, and some childhood friends might be better left as memories than preserved forever in the darkness underground. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, when the wind was just right and the air carried sounds from impossible distances, residents of Millfield could still hear the faint echo of children's voices, playing an eternal game of hide and seek in the spaces between spaces, calling for friends who had learned that growing up, however painful, was better than never growing up at all. In her apartment in Boston, Emma Chen would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, convinced she had heard familiar voices calling her name. But she would remind herself that her real friends, Marcus and Ashley and Brittany and Tommy, would want her to keep living, keep growing, keep experiencing all the joys and sorrows that came with being fully, completely, beautifully human. The game was over. It had been over for 27 years. And Emma had finally learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop hiding and face the light.